you.
Perfect, thank you.
It's now my great pleasure to welcome the cast of the film Looper,
Argo, Spring Breakers,
Cloud Atlas,
Hotel Transylvania.
Silver Linings Playbook.
It just feels like a real film festival for the community.
It's very exciting for me to be here to support a film.
I wanted to show Toronto the way I experience it.
We want people to like our movies and understand them.
What makes it really special for me is the fact that the audiences have responded the way they have.
If I got lucky in the first two, this was the lottery.
I feel like I hit the jackpot. I mean, I can't believe that I'm sitting at a table, you know, flanked by these people.
Every producer I've ever worked with is in that character. And a couple I invented.
You have to be faithful to what they really were.
But I certainly wouldn't, deign to think that we are godfathering anything.
I do.
And that's why he's got the beard.
First nice thing the press have ever done.
I was really happy to find out this is where we were coming.
I said, I'm in.
The festival loved the people who live here.
That was amazing.
Our moderator for this session is Henri Behar, and it is now my pleasure to welcome the director and cast for the film Belle. Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome to the press conference for Belle. The film is a multi-layered film which takes place in England in the mid-1700s. It's about love, money, slavery, the place of women in society, and law and justice. All preoccupations that are very vivid today. And this film was put together and brought to the screen, directed by the lady sitting next to me, Ama Asante. At the other end of the table, the lady who actually plays Belle, Dido Elizabeth Belle. If you haven't seen her Ophelia to Jude Law's Hamlet, you don't know what you missed. Miss Gugu Bata Raw. Sitting next to her, he was extremely mean in the early Harry Potter. In this film, as James Ashford, he's even meaner. Mr. Tom Felton. Sitting next to him, a lady who runs, Lady Mansfield, who runs her estate, her home, in a very specific manner, but gets at the very end to speak her piece, quietly, but specifically and precisely Miss Emily Watson. Sitting next to her, a lady who watches, sees everything, doesn't say anything, but indicates her support in the most discreet and subtlest manner, as Lady Mary Murray, Miss Penelope Wilton. Sitting next to her, possibly the shrillest and most desperate trader in the matrimonial mercato, Lady Ashford Miranda Richardson. Sitting next to her, as John Davigné, of course, he's French and I'm very proud of that. A man equally in love with love, law, and the abolition of slavery, not to mention Belle, Mr. Sam Reed, who's also at the festival this year with another film, Railway Man, where he plays young Stellan Skarsgård. And sitting next to him, possibly one of the most important figure in the film, and in history. He is the Lord Chief Justice and possibly one of the first men of his time to make the difference between justice and what's just, Mr. Tom Wilkinson. Now, I will begin by the end, which is a painting showing two women, young women, one white, one black, or café au lait, but portrayed equally, same value in the frame. That's 200 years old. I had no idea there were any such paintings anywhere. I didn't know whether that was a true one. How did you discover it?
It was a gift to discover this, actually. My producer, Damien Jones, sent me a picture postcard of the painting and told me that the painting depicted two people who really existed in history. I was as stunned as you seem to be when I saw the picture itself, because, as you say, the woman of colour standing beside her white counterpart clearly had equal value in the painting. And I was very lucky because I had not very long before I saw the painting been at an art exhibition in Holland, in Amsterdam, which traced the history of the black subject in art, in European art, from around the 1400s. And what I learned from that very long art exhibition was that obviously oftentimes a black subject in a piece of art was very much like a pet. They were there to express the status and the class of the white muse. And they were background character. They were never looking out at the painter. They were often lower, depicted lower in the painting than the white counterpart. They were often looking up at the white counterpart, and they were often touching the white counterpart in order to draw your eye to that person. This was very different. Dido was actually a tiny bit higher in the painting to her white counterpart. She was looking straight out at the painter. She was dressed very similarly to Elizabeth in silks and expensive jewels. And it is actually Elizabeth who is touching her affectionately rather than the other way round. So I would say everything in the picture draws your eye to Dido. And so when I saw this piece of art, I was absolutely intrigued and fascinated. Who was this woman? Who was her white counterpart? Why did they appear to be equals? And most importantly, who commissioned this painting? That was what I wanted to know.
How much, all of the cast, how aware were you of the situation of colored people at the time? Or, in your case, Mr. Wilkinson, did you get deeper into the Lord Chief Justice's life and writs in order to prepare for the part?
I think you're asking about research, aren't you? Of which I did not one
not
jot.
Not necessarily research. Sometimes, perhaps something that you were aware of. You may be fascinated by history, or not.
I am, yes. It wasn't interesting. First of all, the proposition, your first part of your question, is to the status of black people in those days. I really did not know anything about that. One thing I do know is that in the kind of 200 intervening years, our relationship with black people, or white people's relationship with black people, has grown, in a certain sense, much more complicated. So I was just interested in that as a theme, and it's still a sort of ongoing sort of idea for me as to, you know, I think I'll find out some more about it, actually. I think I'll do my research after doing the movie. That's probably a bit of a novel thing to do, but I'll do it.
Ms. Richardson, did you do any kind of research into the exact financial mercato, matrimonial mercato that existed at the time, which in a way totally defined the women, and particularly the mothers?
Some, but I wouldn't say I was meticulous about it. I mean, I think the script gives us has done a lot of the work in that way. It's very clear that we're talking about not just the status of coloured people or the downtrodden, but we're talking about women in a particular way as well. And that Lady Ashford's case, Lady Ashford being a fictional character, she's her goal in life is to get her children settled, and she can only do that by she deals with and around money. It's interesting that it's the women who were the powerful ones in that situation. They were the ones who went out and facilitated the marriage, and yet they were also in a secondary position. But that was her power. She needed to get her kids secure, and that's why she says what she says at the end.
Emily?
What I found really interesting was trying to get my head into a place where this woman I was playing was very clearly thoughtful, educated, caring, loving person, but absolutely racist to the core in a way that we would, she was a woman of her time and she just thought like everybody else, but if we came across her attitude, you know, as a child walks into the room and she says, we can't possibly take her in because she's black. You know, it's getting your head around that was quite weird. But I think what's so successful in the film is the sense of a young woman of mixed race not really realizing what's wrong because she's loved and because she's cared for and she's nourished and she's nurtured but something is profoundly awry in her, and it's, you know, it's a time of change.
Except there's a moment that's very disturbing for the viewer. It's the moment where you look at yourself in the mirror and almost try to rip your flesh apart or remove your skin, your color. Is it difficult to know that you're going to shoot that scene the following morning?
Yeah, I was really anxious about that scene because it was on the last day of the whole shoot. And I knew that scene was so important because as much as there is this romance and this sumptuous world and this beauty and decadence that inner conflict that Dido is going through, I feel like that scene and the ugliness of that scene really underpins everything else that's going along on the surface and all the beauty of the world that we've created. So yeah, that was quite an intense experience. But I think it was really essential to balance the, as I say, the marriage market and the romance with her inner turmoil of coming to understand how to channel that frustration, which we see throughout the film.
I mean, it was an important marker scene because we had to know, we had to understand what was going on inside of Dido as a starting place. Dido goes from very much from a character who says, you know, as you wish, sir, to a character that says, as I wish. That is her internal story arc, if you like. And we needed to mark out very clearly to the audience a starting place. Where does Dido start from? And I think that scene, you know, in terms of her journey and her search for identity, was so important for us to understand that, you know, sometimes the world puts us in a position where we are burdened by exactly what we are. We feel burdened by the shape of our eyes, the size of our nose, the size of our lips, the color of our skin, the size of our butt, you know, whatever it is. And Dido has to go from a place where she integrates where she is uncomfortable with her identity to one where she can integrate both sides of herself, both black and white, both the child of slave and the child of aristocrat, and bring those two things together and say, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. And there are actually a number of mirror scenes within the film. And each time we come to one of those mirror scenes, Dido is in a different place. In the beginning where she's self-harming, in the middle where she's with Mabel, who is one of the first black people that she's seen since her mother died, and where she has a kind of bonding moment with Mabel. And finally, when she takes off her ring and decides that she's not going to marry Oliver Ashford, and that she's going to be her own woman and make her own decisions. And so, you know, the journey is charted in many ways by the mirror image that we see of Dido throughout the film.
How did you two find each other?
I think I met Amma 6 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
For Where Hands Touch.
For another film that I had written called Where Hands Touch, which is yet to be made. That project collapsed. But I saw Gugu for that, and it was the first time I'd seen her. I'd written and directed. I had written and was about to direct it, and I was completely blown away by Gugu's casting session. And it was quite interesting that once I began the writing process on Belle, that Damien said, you know, there's a young actress that has known the film in a previous incarnation. Damien, the producer, had been working on the film for quite a while, trying to get a script off the ground. It had failed, and the project had stalled by the time it came to me. So when Damien engaged me as a writer-director on the project in the UK, I had to go back to scratch, start with the research again. And whilst I was writing the very first draft, Damien told me all about Gugu, who I had met just once. And we started a process of meetings across the various drafts I did, 17 in total. I kept on meeting with Gugu. Gugu read every single draft, I think. And so it was a relationship that started to develop long before we began filming.
Another embarrassing scene for the viewer is your scene, the moment, Mr. Felton, when you grab her off screen, and one would almost hate to imagine what exactly it is that you do, but was that also a difficult scene to prepare?
Definitely, yeah. I actually really like Gugu, so it was quite awkward to grab her in a ungentlemanly fashion. Yes. So I think I was constantly sort of doing a very soft grab, and then eventually we had to sort of keep ramping it up. And following the cut, I would quickly apologise 1,000 times to try and worm my way back into her good books. Yes, it was. You know, actually, it was a fun scene in an odd way. Amma spoke really brilliantly to me before we started about where James is coming from, and it's kind of it's easy to see him as a racist or as a fascist pig, but really I think a lot of it comes from fear of change and unwillingness to want to evolve with the way society was moving. And looking back at it, I think it's quite incredible that had those events not happened and had these characters not had done what they had done, we may be seeing race and class and all the rest in a completely different light to today. So, yeah, well, I thoroughly enjoyed not only the scene but the entire context of the character.
Now, your character, Mr. Reed, is perhaps the most modern in our way of understanding things. What you say is stuff that we possibly heard in 1968 with students' uprising, etc. Yeah. Was that present in your mind when you approached the role?
Absolutely, because I was looking at the Zong ship, which is obviously the most, is what the story is centered around. And the idea for us now that we can own another person, ownership over another person, for us now is absurd. And for John to kind of process that idea that everyone around him accepted it. Slavery wasn't existing in England at the time, but the whole country ran off slavery. It was the biggest form of economic trade at the time, and so it is shocking. And he was thinking like, what are these people, So I think it was very easy for me to identify with him as a character, and having all these people who believed in the values of the time, who wore the costumes, who carried these morals. It was very easy for me to kind of feel like I was constantly bashing my head against a brick wall, which is kind of what he is doing a lot throughout the film. And I think it takes meeting Lord Mansfield and somebody who also agrees but knows how to work through the law and work through the rules of society to change them, rather than kind of like getting naked and screaming at the top of your lungs. So.
One more question, and then we'll take question from you guys. And the question is, of course, to you, Ms. Wilton. You have possibly the most silent character, except for the beef you have with the French, which I take offense to. But it's generally fairly difficult or delicate to etch a character that doesn't say much, that doesn't move much, that has the most discreet gestures, sort of giving a handkerchief very discreetly throughout a film. You've done this, I'm sure, 1,000,000 times, so my question is ridiculous, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do you do it?
I don't know. I think it's having an inner life, I suppose, as the person you're playing. I mean, you're carrying. Not everything is said in words, especially in film. It is the most. It actually can be as important not to say anything and to show what you're feeling with everything else apart from speech. And of course, the character is written specifically that she doesn't have a voice, because at the time she wouldn't have a voice. She was a maiden sister who is under the care of her brother, Lord Mansfield. So her voice would not be heard, and that character is quite important to be seen, how women were treated. Not treated, she didn't expect to be treated in any other word. She had a roof over her head, she was looked after, and she had a role in the house she lived in. But if there were extra men at a dinner party, she would not be invited. So for her to say, "You won't be having dinner with us tonight, Belle," would be quite normal. These were all perfectly normal things that would be carrying on in this house. She wouldn't have known anything else. The thing that she cared more than anything about were these two girls, and the fact that they should not be in the situation that she was in. She wanted them to find husbands, because that was the only way out, whether they could have some sort of independence and they would be able to have families and a fulfilled life, which unfortunately she was not able. It was stopped in her case. So the silence was golden in a way. It was very helpful.
Question in the audience? Okay. Over there? Did I see it? Never mind. Then I will go back. The situation that the family structure that is prevalent throughout the film, where your son, I'm sorry, Mr. Wilton, the Lord Justice's son has a child, illegitimate and of mixed blood, brought into a British estate and being raised as part of the house and not in some scullery elsewhere. Is it something that you imagined, or whoever wrote the script? Is it something that is historically substantiated?
That this happened?
Yes.
100%. It's historically substantiated that Dido lived within the household. We know that one of the American governors travelled over to speak to Lord Mansfield when he was presiding over one of his cases. Actually, it was possibly a different case. I believe it was the Somerset case, which was another case involving a slave that Lord Mansfield presided over in the Supreme Court. And in his diaries, he makes note of the Negro who wore silks, who clearly had Lord Mansfield, I'm paraphrasing now, wrapped round her little finger, who did not dine with the guests, but came out after dinner and attended the salon, and was clearly an equal to Elizabeth, the cousin. So it is 100%, yeah, absolutely substantiated that Dido grew up at Kenwood House, one of our iconic English country estates. And not only that Dido was particularly intelligent, and that Lord Mansfield recognised that. And so he did something with her which was very, very unusual for the time for women, which is that he worked with her in his study, and she would take his dictation. And this was because she was deemed by him to be particularly special, clever, and clearly she was very loved. So we know that they had a very tight father-daughter relationship, a very tight bond. We know that she was particularly clever, or he at least deemed her to be so, and that she was brought up in silks, you know, as a relative equal to her white counterpart. That was the gold dust for me.
But is she a unique case, or were there others?
We believe it was a unique case in the UK. What I know is that the French had a greater, shall we say, propensity to do this. So, for instance, I know that there is a gentleman in history from around the same period who is often referred to as the Black Mozart, who was the child of a French aristocrat and an African slave, whose father decided that he simply didn't want his son to be brought up on a cotton field, that his son was too good for that. And so he brought his son back to France, educated him in France, and that young man grew up to move around with French aristocracy. And that is well documented in history. And it would appear that the French were slightly more likely to do it, but it was still a rarity. Dido is the only case in history that we know of in the UK.
Okay. Well, when we are good, we are very good.
When you are good, you are superb.
Thank you very much. Got a question here. No, it's the other mic you have to look into. Thank you. Both.
Anyway, thank you very much for bringing this film to the festival. Unfortunately, I have not seen it. I'm looking forward to seeing it. But from what I'm hearing is that you have brought the history of Black people throughout the centuries, because I know from Rome, from Scipio Africanus, from so many different histories that people were there, Black people were there, but they're never shown on any of the shows ever. And also I asked two completely different gentlemen, one Korean and one an African American, and they both said that this was the best film that they had seen.
How fantastic.
Absolutely. Said that the interplay between the sisters was amazing, and also that it was a very complex and loving relationship between the interracial couple. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I mean, I think what's interesting is that this history actually belongs to all of us. It's a history that doesn't just belong to the Black diaspora, but it belongs to all of us, because this is a history that involves the interplay between people of color and and the other people that they interacted with around the world. And one of the things that it was important for me to do in the film was to have one other character that should be a woman of color in the film, and that is Mabel the maid, who is the first, Black woman that Dido comes across after leaving her mother. And the reason why it was important for me to do that was because I wanted to show exactly, as you say, that Dido could have been a servant. Lord Mansfield could have easily taken her in under his protection, but not reared her with his wife, Lady Mansfield, as a lady, and dressed her in silks and educated her and taught her to play the piano and all of that. But also this other character has a Welsh accent. And the reason why I wanted her to have a Welsh accent was to show that we were everywhere. But we were not everywhere in isolation. We were everywhere within a European context. And therefore, this isn't just our history. This is all of our history. And that was really important for me. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, quite a few of the lines that are said in the film can be construed as political, but possibly the most covertly political monologue is the one that Miss Watson gives to her husband at the end. Maybe I'm too French and consider everything to be slightly
Behind every
political.
great man.
I'm sorry?
I said behind every great man. Yeah, I think when she says, he says, I never broke the rules. And, you know, she's saying, you were like that young man once. And he said, well, I never broke the rules. And said, no, you just became powerful enough to ignore them. And that's the...
To
make new
them,
ones,
to
change
them,
them,
powerful enough
yeah.
to change them, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's,
Absolutely.
you know, having the courage to accept change is a, you know, it's a huge moment in any history.
It's an important moment, I think, in the film, in that, first of all, you understand, I think, that the relationship between this man and woman is one in which this woman actually has a lot of power. She is insightful, she is able to have an effect on him, and he listens to her. Secondly, you learn, without question, that Lord Mansfield loves Dido unconditionally because he tells us. But thirdly, in terms of the political context that you talk about, you know, it's really the scene where we ram home that Lord Mansfield is a man sitting on the cusp of change with one foot stuck in order and rules and the other foot stuck in the future and in change. And those two sides of himself are fighting. And, you know, when Lady Mansfield says the line, sometimes you cannot fight change because you are a part of it, it's the moment where I think it's really rammed home to him and us, that actually, whether he likes it or not, if the fight between conditioning and instinct is going on within him, instinct is winning. His conditioning is losing, and no matter what, he is going to be the man that he was born to be, and conditioning is not going to hold that down. So he is a man who at once will commission an extraordinary painting in which two people of different colours are painted as equals, but he is also the man that will preside over the Zong case and take an important step towards the abolition of slavery. That is a man who, whether he likes it or not, is a part of change. So it was an important scene, and one that took a long while for me to write.
Now, we opened this press conference with the original painting. I will close it with, who painted the film painting?
That is an interesting story. The film painting existed in a couple of guises, I have to say. The first guise of it was the one that we actually shot. Did you get a shock when you saw that, by the way, Gugu? Yeah. So it was the one that we shot, and the problem with it was that it didn't look like the two girls, and it was one of our production art department that painted it. It didn't look enough like our two actresses. We also needed it to resonate with a modern audience as well. So it is slightly different to the original painting. When I did my first couple of cuts of the film, I realized that the painting wasn't resonating in the way that I wanted it to, because it didn't actually look enough like the two girls. But also, Dido did not look perhaps confident, happy, and strident enough in our original painting for it to reflect on her journey towards a happy identity. So we had to use visual effects to create something that looked much closer to the girls than the original painting. So it's a combination of a real painting and visual effects, using the faces of the two girls. Sarah Gaddon, who was so sorry is not here today, who plays Elizabeth, and Gugu.
Gugu, you've been CGI'd.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't have given that away.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Shall we?
Well, you sort of give it away. Yeah, because the defiant look in the painter's eyes and the fact that he blocks the half the painting.